Hello. This demo will show how to use motion charts to alleviate some of the hangups caused when trying to plot rows in the standard line charts within Google Analytics reports. After viewing this tutorial, you will be able to analyze individual dimension values in a clean and distinct visual manner, quickly and on the fly, without the need to use anything other than the standard Google Analytics front-end web-based reporting engine. Let's start with the basic all channels report. Suppose we wanted to isolate display, referral, and direct traffic on this graph. We would select the three dimensions and hit plot rows. When we plot these rows, the overall total users metric still remains on the graph, making any distinction of the specific rows that we wanted to look at very difficult to see. The way around this is to switch from the default line chart into the other option, motion chart. Motion charts provide a multi-dimensional over-time analysis of the data in your report. By selecting metrics to be represented on the X and Y axis and by the color of the dots, you plot each dot in 4 dimensions. By pressing play or dragging the slider at the bottom of the chart, you'll see the data change over time, thereby adding time as a 5th dimension. So, these reports can be not only very useful, but kind of even fun to play around with. There are 3 types of motion charts: dot-based, which we are looking at now, bar-based, and line-based. Line-based is unique in that it removes all of the motion capability of motion charts. This is the one we are going to use to help us solve the row plotting issues that we saw on the standard line charts. First thing we want to do is to select the metric on the left that we want to assess. It's not always the one that you were just looking at in the normal line charts, so in this case we want to select users. Then we want to select the dimensions to look at. So we were looking at display, referral, and direct. Already we have a better visualization because the total overall metric is not shown, so you can see a much greater distinction between the individual dimensional data. But we are also still seeing the data that we didn't select on the graph, like social, paid, and affiliates. So let's clean this up to make it even better. What we want to do is select the settings icon, which looks like a little wrench, and then we want to move the opacity of non-selected items down to 0% and close that up. Now while we can still hover over the deselected items on the right to show them on the graph, what we are ultimately left with is a nice clean representation of only the rows that we wanted plotted. There are situations, however, that using this method will still make the visual differentiation unclear. Take, for instance, if we wanted to plot some rows that had values which were not in the range of one another. So let's clear these all out and try putting organic search, paid search, and affiliates on the graph. You can see that even though we are using the line chart within the motion charts, the smaller dimensional plots are still dwarfed by the larger one, much like how the overall total metric was dwarfing the rows we plotted in the standard Google Analytics interface at the beginning of this demo. But there is a solution to this as well. Here is a pop-out menu that you can use to define your viewing scale as either linear or logarithmic. Let's take a look at the difference. The linear scale is based on addition, so everything is in an even scale, meaning the distance between each row is always the same. In this case, 500. So from 0 to 500 is this first space, and then you move up the next area from 500 to 1000, and the next area from 1000 to 1500, always in an even increment of 500. The logarithmic scale, however, is based on multiplication. So when you switch to logarithmic scale, the motion charts in Google Analytics will use what is known as a base 10 sequence, as each point in the scale is multiplied by 10. So now you can see a different row distribution, where this first section here is 0 to 10, the next one goes from 10 to 100, and the next one goes from 100 to 1000, each time multiplying by 10. The metric values themselves never change, only the visualization of those values change. Both linear and logarithmic distributions are equally accurate, and you should simply choose the one that best fits the needs for your visualization. One thing to note is that unlike when you export a standard Google Analytics line chart, if you use the export capability within a Google Analytics motion chart, the graph will not show up on your export. So, if you want the graph visually represented in any place outside of the Google Analytics web interface, you will need to grab a screen capture of the motion chart graph from your browser. It is also worth mentioning that while this is a great option for ad hoc, on-the-fly row plotting, if you have a data visualization like this which you would like to visit more regularly, Google Data Studio might be the way to go. In addition to Data Studio having the dynamic dimension selection features and the ability to switch between linear and logarithmic scales, Data Studio may also be more easily accessible for other people in your organization who don't have the specialized knowledge in Google Analytics configurations and motion chart techniques. The solution presented in this demo just happens to work really well for quick impromptu analysis. I'd like to thank you for watching. For support with Google Analytics, data visualization, and data engineering, please contact Enor.